Here's a question I have for you, and maybe you don't really have too much to say about it, but I think a lot of people get stuck with they're interested in buying a laundromat for whatever reason, maybe to escape their 9 to 5, maybe for that financial freedom, maybe just because they've always had the entrepreneur bug, whatever the case may be, and they start looking, they find something, maybe they dig a little bit deeper, and then there's this point in time where they're like, you know what, this usually isn't a conscious thing, but like, hey, like this is scary. Like, I don't know if I can do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So like I say, man, like that night or day before, I kind of called the broker and I was just like, pump the brakes. Well, I need to pump the brakes. Like everything had lined up and was going fine or whatever, but I was just like, hang on, just pump the brakes. I need another week. You know what I mean? So it was like totally scary. You know what I mean?
Did he pump the brakes for you?
He didn't.
I didn't think he would, but
he didn't. Yeah. But
you need a little shove off the cliff,
Yeah, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was funny. Yeah. So like literally like final quarter or whatever. But it was a thing to where like, I mean, I did have reason. It wasn't like purely cold feet, the final lease, we hadn't gotten a copy of the final lease back yet. Like we had reviewed kind of like a draft or whatever. Right. But there was like a couple stipulations that we wanted in there. One was to allow the beauty salon, kind of supplement a big part of the rent. So, but anyway, we made it happen. We went through with it, been happy with the decision.
So how'd you get over that? Just to kind of take that step, like, I think that there's like a step in there somewhere where you just have got to step off the cliff. And a lot of people get that foot up in the air,
right? And
they can't take it. They can't put that foot down on the other side of the chasm. You know what I mean? And I don't know, like, how did you get there?
Like I'm a analysis paralysis kind of guy too. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, well, let's rerun the numbers again. Okay, let's, you know what I mean? Like it got to the point where my wife was just like, you've run through these numbers 800 times, 500 different ways. It works. Let's just do it, and it just like, it was just like, yeah, you're right. Let's just do it. You know what I mean? And sort of like looking at, kind of, oh, hey, worst case scenario, looking at the worst case scenario out of these 800 different extrapolations or whatever. It's like, what was the movie? It was one of the Avengers movie with Doctor Strange, and he's like running through all the calculations or whatever. And you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you've gone through this worst case scenario, right? Are you okay with the worst case scenario? Are you okay with it? Cool. Of course, we're shooting for the moon, but are you okay with worst case scenario? And it's like, all right, worst case scenario. Okay, we break even for, some months. Let's say we break even, based on the calculations, we could do that. Cool. Let's do it.
Yeah. So you just barrage of analysis, and then you had your wife kick you over the edge. I mean, that was the reality.
Basically. Yeah.
All right. So if you're out there and you are stuck taking that step, you just need to find somebody to kick you over the edge. That's
right.
But I think that's a great question. I mean, like, one of my takeaways from, I read the book a couple times, actually, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And, that book changed a lot about how I think about a lot of things. But one of the things that he, advocates that you do in that book is, when you're making a decision, and in his context, it's like, hey, going remote, working remotely, and, and all that. But I think it applies to anything, is like, write out what is the worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? And write out, okay, if everything goes horrible, what's going to happen? And then if everything goes great, what's going to happen? And once you have the concrete, like, okay, here's what's going to happen if everything, goes down, and you kind of start naming your fears. Then you can start dealing with them. Right. And I think a lot of times we get caught up with that, that fear of something. Like it's very ambiguous a lot of times. Right. And we get stuck there, and it's not until we can actually kind of name those fears and write them down, and then we can start to kind of deal with them to take that step.
Exactly. And just like keeping a finger on those things, as we were kind of going through like the due diligence and whatever, it's like, all right, well, this number, I don't have high confidence in this number right here. Let me keep an eye on that. Let me double click on that to see how I can dive in a little bit deeper to give myself a little bit more confidence with whatever that number is, right? The utility bills seem low or high or whatever. Let's double click on that and really put some analysis on that until I feel better about it,
Yeah. And make a plan, right? Like let's, if you're income, you're starting to see some like yellow flags or some red flags, maybe income's not exactly what the seller was saying or something like that. Right. Then number one, I mean, there's things you can do during due diligence, but it's also like, okay, what if my instinct is right here, my intuition's right, and income is lower? What are the things that I could do to make that income go higher? Right. And you can start working on the problems when you name them. But when you keep those fears ambiguous, it's really tough to overcome those fears at that point. So.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. So your wife kicked you over the edge and you closed on that thing. Talk to us about like, what was that like? Starting day one, you have this own business. I'm assuming you were still working at that point.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So like literally day one, it was just like kind of surreal. You know what I mean? Like, go in, we do the closing, everybody, we're signing papers and kind of exchanging keys and, all these sorts of things. And then like the broker left, the previous owner left, and it was like, this is yours. Like, you know what I mean? And so I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like what? Like it was literally like the middle of a day where we like just like changed over. You know what I mean? And he had already like emptied the change machine out. With the bills out of the change machine. I had paid him for like the quarters that were still in the machine and that sort of thing. And then he was like kind of showing me like how to empty the change machine, right? Empty the bills out. And he like took the little thing out and he like, oh, and this is yours. It was like $6 or whatever. He was like, that's yours. And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. And I mean, if you think about like return on investment, how in what other business or whatever can you get it's a small return, but like in what other business can you get a return that fast? It was like 5 or 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How many other businesses, can you say that you get like a return on investment that soon? You know what I mean? So that was kind of a cool little thing that I kind of like picked up on, you know what I mean? As we were doing the turnover.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a good feeling too. And like, you got all this buildup going into this thing, right? And all the nerves and all the doubts and all the uncertainty, all this stuff, right? And then you get in there and you're like, wow. Like this $6 is my $6. Right. Like we're going, it's happening. As you're talking, I'm thinking about like when I had my first kid, right? And you're like, okay, the nurses are gone. I'm supposed to drive this thing home and like,
and then what? And then you get them home and like, they're like still in the car seat, you like put them on a bed or whatever, like in the car seat. It's just like, all right, what do we do now?
Yeah, no. It's like the middle of the day. And
right.
Like,
Yep.